Today in the Daily Dose, Ancient Greece. Greek mythology. Beginning sometime around the 18th century BC, when Minoan and Mycenaean singers began spreading Greek myths in the oral poetic tradition, Greek mythology was created to teach ordinary and high-minded people alike about important and meaningful human experiences, including complex themes such as illness and death, earthquakes, floods, famines, and war. Fundamental to all classical mythologies, the ancient Greeks believed that unseen gods and goddesses controlled every aspect of their lives, inspiring the ancients to pray to individual gods for help and protection, increasing their homage during times of great difficulty, under the belief that humans had somehow angered or disappointed a given god. In their quest to please and honor their gods and goddesses, the Greeks constructed ornate temples and sculptures throughout the Grecian world. And while Greek gods and goddesses were manyfold, the 12 Olympians were most revered in Greek mythology, including Zeus, the leader of the gods, Hera, his wife, the goddess of marriage and childbirth, Poseidon, the god of the sea, the goddess of love, Aphrodite, Hades, the god of the underworld and the dead, and Ares, the god of warfare and battle. The Greeks also believed that the gods lived as one like a family atop Mount Olympus, where they behaved much like humans in their ability to argue with one another, fall in love, make mistakes, and feel overt jealousy when shunned. With its extensive influence on art, culture, and literature for generations to come, ancient Greek poets and artists constructed stories and myths that still hold relevance to this day, including a woman named Pandora, who opened up a box that unleashed all things evil upon the world of man, Theseus and the Minotaur, which tells the story of a prince who hunts a monster through a labyrinth to save the woman he loves, Perseus and the Gorgon, about a man who must kill a woman who can turn people to stone just by looking at them. Most enduring, however, is Homer's epic poems as told in the Iliad and the Odyssey, which follow the post-Trojan War travels of Greek heroes such as Achilles, Agamemnon, Hector, and more, making Greek mythology a foundational primer for Western civilization. The ancient civilization of Sparta. Rising to power around 650 BCE, Sparta was a once thriving city-state of proud warriors, or Spartiates, who consisted of three main groups of citizens. Spartans were full citizen warriors, Helots were slaves, while a third class, known as Perioeci, were neither slaves nor citizens, but rather transient craftsmen or merchants. All healthy male Spartans participated in compulsory education, known as agoge, which taught obedience, courage, self-control, and physical strength. Helots were fellow Greeks who had been captured and enslaved during the Spartans' near constant warring raids against neighboring islands and city-states, making Helots a necessary labor source who tended to the day-to-day functioning of the city, including farming, domestic servitude, nursing, and military support. Given their majority status, most Helots were treated deplorably, often subjected to brutal and oppressive tactics in an effort to prevent uprisings. After becoming indoctrinated in military training at the tender age of 7, Spartan boys were subjected to constant physical competitions and conditioning, often given meager rations to improve their efficiency at stealing or foraging food. When a Spartan male reached 20 years of age, he became a full-time soldier for the next 40 years, provided he could live that long. Known for their long hair and red cloaks, Spartans, or hoplites as they were known, wore helmets, breastplates, and ankle guards made of bronze. Hoplites also carried a spear and a sword, along with a shield generally made of a composite of bronze and wood. With helots tending to all domestic responsibilities, Spartan women were perhaps the most liberated in ancient Greece. Many received formal educations, while engaging in dance or athletic competitions as a way of attracting mates. Once they reached adulthood, Spartan women owned property and businesses, providing Spartiate females with some of the highest levels of equality with men anywhere in classical antiquity. In 371 BCE, Sparta suffered a bloody defeat in the Battle of Leuctra against Thebes, followed by a Theban invasion of Spartan territory, which led to the liberation of the Helots. Sparta would live on as a second-rate power in a long and steady decline, until in 1834, King Otto of Greece founded the modern-day town of Sparta atop the once most powerful city-state of the ancient Greeks. The Acropolis. Translated as the High City from the Greek, the Acropolis of Athens consists of 4 hills on the Attica Plateau of Greece, a high-ground landmark that has been occupied by humans for thousands of years, beginning with the ancient Mycenaeans during the Late Bronze Age. Years later, during the 6th century BC, the Athenians built a Doric limestone tribute to the goddess Athena, known as Bluebeard Temple, followed by a second temple dedicated to Artemis Brouona, the goddess of expectant mothers in Greek mythology. Surviving the Greek Dark Ages from 800 to 480 BC, after invading Persians destroyed Bluebeard Temple, the Athenians began construction on the old Parthenon, until a second attack by the Persians destroyed nearly every structure atop the Acropolis, prompting Athenians to bury all remaining sculptures inside nearby caves. During the Golden Age of Athens from 460 to 430 BC, Athenian ruler Pericles set out to elevate the Acropolis to a new level of splendor never seen before, setting in motion a 50-year construction project under the direction of well-known architects Callicrates and Ectinus, as well as the renowned sculptor Phidias. Construction continued even after the ruler's death, resulting in the Propylaea, or Grand Entryway, the Temple of Athena Nike, the Ionic Temple Erechtheion, the statue of Athena Promachos, and the enormous Doric-style Parthenon. Following the Greek War of Independence in 1822, the Acropolis has witnessed near-perpetual restoration efforts after years of foreign invaders used the structures as mosques, Christian churches, and munition storage facilities, the later resulting in heavy bombardment and destruction by the Venetians in 1687. Today, some 2.5 million tourists visit the site on an annual basis, making the Acropolis an enduring look-back into the storied world of ancient Greece. Leonidas and the Spartan 300. Trained as a hoplite warrior since childhood, the custom for all male citizens of Sparta, Leonidas became king when his older half-brother Cleomenes died under violent and suspicious circumstances in 490 BCE. During his reign, ancient Greece at the time was made up of hundreds of city-states, with Athens and Sparta vying for the 2 most powerful city-states in the land. And while Greek city-states frequently competed for land and resources, when it came to repelling foreign invaders, many of the most powerful city-states banded together for their mutual defense. During Leonidas's lifetime, in 490 BCE, Persian King Darius attempted such an invasion during the First Persian War, when a combined Greek army repelled Persian invaders at the Battle of Marathon. 10 years later, Leonidas would lead a second Greek force during the Second Persian War, when Darius's son Xerxes again pressed into Greece. Moving south along the east coast of Greece, Xerxes' army moved in parallel with his Persian navy, prompting Leonidas' 7,000-man army, including 300 loyal Spartan hoplites, to position his forces at the coastal pass of Thermopylae in an attempt to entrap and repel the advancing Persian force as they advanced on Athens. During battle, hoplites employed round shields, spears, and short iron swords, compacting into phalanx formations, which made for a wall of shields against an impending frontal attack. At first, Leonidas' phalanx strategy worked well when the two opposing armies came together at the Battle of Thermopylae, where he and his men successfully withstood 2 days of determined attacks by Xerxes' substantially larger army. Leonidas' strategy and geographic advantage ended, however, after a local Greek informed Xerxes about a backdoor route around the Thermopylae Pass, which allowed the Persians to attack the Greeks from behind. Accepting that the Persians had successfully outmaneuvered his army, Leonidas sent much of his forces into retreat, while an elite corps of Spartans, Thespians, and Thebans remained behind with a common will to fight to the death. Surrounded by his loyal Spartan 300, Leonidas and his men subsequently perished at Thermopylae, forever cementing Leonidas into the hero-worshipping cult that became a Greek tradition from the 8th century BCE onward. Heroes were considered intermediaries to ancient Greek gods, and 40 years after the Battle of Thermopylae, Spartan authorities exhumed Leonidas' remains before building a shrine in his honor, making Leonidas and the Spartan 300 a permanent chapter in ancient Greek folklore. Socrates. Born and raised during the Golden Age of Athens, as a youth, Socrates studied the writings of contemporary philosopher Anaxagoras, while he was taught rhetoric by Aphasia, the gifted mistress of the Athenian leader Pericles. Born physically ugly, with bulging eyes and an upturned nose, Socrates showed great physical endurance and courage during his years as a hoplite or foot soldier, rescuing the future Athenian leader Alcibiades during the siege of Pertidia in 432 BC. After his service during the Peloponnesian War, Socrates became a beloved teacher and philosopher to the youth of Athens, despite his unkempt appearance in a society with highly refined standards of beauty and hygiene. While Socrates left no written records of his philosophical teachings, two of his students, the future historian Xenophon and philosopher Plato, wrote down many of their elders' teachings, including his Socratic technique, or the disciplined practice of thoughtful questioning, which allows a student to examine ideas logically before determining the validity of the ideas in question. In a nutshell, Socrates believed that philosophy, despite the limits of human knowledge, should achieve practical results for the greater good of society, pointing out in Plato's Socratic dialogues that human choice is almost entirely motivated by an individual's desire for happiness. Socrates avoided politics for most of his life, preferring to maintain unbiased friendships during the fierce power struggles that followed the Peloponnesian War, until his name was drawn to serve in the Athens Assembly, which was one of 3 branches in ancient Greek democracy. When tyrannical Athenian politicians ordered Socrates to participate in the arrest and murder of Leon of Salamis, he adamantly refused, an act of civil disobedience that Martin Luther King Jr. would reference in his letter from a Birmingham jail. In 399 BC, Socrates was sentenced to death for refusing to honor Athenian gods and corrupting the youth of Athens, where he uttered his now famous phrase upon his conviction, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Despite Plato's spirited defense of his teacher, 30 days after his conviction, Socrates drank a cup of brewed hemlock tea handed to him by his executioner. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by his legion of friends and former students, leading Benjamin Franklin to write in his 1791 autobiography, For humility, imitate Jesus and Socrates. The Parthenon. Perched atop the Acropolis of Athens and dedicated to the city's patron goddess Athena, the Parthenon was built by the celebrated Greek statesman Pericles and renowned Greek architects Echinus and Callicrates, along with the famous Greek sculptor Phidias. Constructed from 447 BCE until its completion in 432 BCE, the Parthenon stands as the most important surviving structure of classical Greece, representing a high-water example of Doric order architecture. To the Athenians who built it, the Parthenon and its adjoining Periclean monuments of the Acropolis were built as a celebration of the Hellenic city's victory over Persian invaders, as well as a symbol of thanksgiving to the gods that made their victory possible. Built atop the ruins of an older Parthenon, destroyed in the Persian invasion of 480 BCE, the Parthenon served not only as the city's treasury, but also as the center of Athenian religious life, not to mention a standout symbol of Athens' power, wealth, and culture. The structure includes a rectangular floor plan with a 23,000 square foot base, replete with 46 outer Doric columns surrounding 19 inner columns, all of which are slightly tapered to give the temple a symmetrical appearance. Absent of straight lines or right angles, the Parthenon stands as a true achievement in late Greek architecture. Housed in the original structure was a 39-foot-tall gold and ivory statue of Athena, which has long since been lost to the steady march of foreign invasion and looting, although many smaller works of art and sculpture remain to this day. After the Christian Byzantines conquered Greece in the 6th century AD, quickly outlined the pagan worship of polytheistic Greek gods, the Parthenon was converted to a Christian church, where the missing statue of Athena was replaced by a marble pulpit and bishop's chair. The Parthenon would remain a Christian church until Ottoman Turks invaded Athens in 1458 AD, converting the structure into a mosque, although much of the Christian paintings and sculptures were left intact. When the Christian Holy League attacked the Ottomans in 1687, the Parthenon was converted into an ammunitions depot and troop shelter, resulting in relentless cannon bombardments by the Holy League that caused hundreds of deaths and massive structural damage to the Parthenon itself. Thanks to ongoing restoration efforts by the Greek government, the Parthenon lives on as a landmark achievement in the early history of Western civilization. The Peloponnesian War. After alliances were formed among city-states in ancient Greece, pitting the dominant Athenians against the rising power of Sparta, as is frequently the case in the back-and-forth struggle for hegemony, the Peloponnesian War resulted from rising tensions between the opposing Athenian and Peloponnesian leagues, sparking a war that lasted from 431 to 404 BC. Rooted in civil war within the obscure country of Epidamnus, the first 10 years of the Peloponnesian War became known as the Archidamian War, so named after Sparta's king Archidamus, under the Spartan slogan of freedom for the Greeks, as Spartans fought to liberate themselves from Athenian rule. As Spartan forces decimated the countryside surrounding Athens, before laying siege to the walled city itself, Athenian general Pericles declined to attack Spartan forces attempting to breach the city walls, instead opting for multiple naval campaigns abroad, returning to the besieged city in 430 BC, just as plague swept through Athens, taking the lives of 2/3 of the city's population. A year later, after Pericles was censured during a political uprising, he too succumbed to the disease, which in turn fractured Athenian unity and leadership. With only mixed results on both sides of the conflict, the two warring city-states signed the Peace of Nicias in 423 BC, which called for the end of the conflict for the next 50 years. Brought down by rebellion between various allies on both sides of the war, the Peace of Nicias crumbled after just 8 years, when in 415 BC, Athens was called upon by allies in Sicily to help ward off invaders from Syracuse. Convinced that Athens was planning an invasion of Italy, Sparta backed Syracuse, leading to a string of naval defeats for the Athenians. Despite the number of Athenian losses, war raged on for another decade, until Spartan general Lysander destroyed the last of the Athenian navy, forcing the surrender of Athens in 404 BC after a lengthy siege of the city. Athens' defeat marked the end of the Golden Age of Greece, while the Peloponnesian War in particular forever changed styles of warfare that eventually led to Athens' absorption into the rising Spartan Empire, making the Peloponnesian War a major turning point in the late history of ancient Greece. March of the 10,000. Following the death of Persian King Darius II in 404 BC, a power struggle developed between the dead king's sons, Artaxerxes and Cyrus, and after Artaxerxes was named king of Persia in 401 BC, Cyrus hired 10,000 Greek mercenaries to join forces with his 20,000-man army for a planned military takeover of the Persian Empire. Concealing his true intentions from the hoplites with the false objective of driving hostile tribes from the Taurus Mountains, when King Artaxerxes got wind of his brother's approach, he attacked the opposing army at the Battle of Cunaxis, north of the Persian capital. And when Cyrus was killed in battle, the now unemployed Greek warriors began their perilous 1,700-mile retreat for home. As recorded in the Anabasis by Xenophon, after Artaxerxes beheaded most of the Greeks' generals and captains, the surviving hoplites chose Xenophon as their leader, at first fighting off attacks by Persian archers and cavalrymen who struck at their rear guard, employing deceptive night tactics and feints to overcome the Persian enemy, at the same time battling deep snow and biting cold that claimed the lives of pack animals and hoplites alike. Reaching the northern Zagros Mountains in present-day Turkey, the Greeks faced their second challenge from the Carduchian tribe, who launched repeated attacks on the hoplites from high-ground positions and other natural choke points. Forging onto the Armenian highlands, the Greeks found themselves shadowed by Carduchian and Armenian troops atop opposing high-ground positions, forcing Xenophon to set up another rearguard feint, which ultimately forced both opposing armies into full retreat. The remaining trek home would further test the mettle of every surviving warrior, marching across frigid mountainous terrain as men and animals succumbed to starvation and frostbite, all the while imploring local guides to point the way home. Reaching their final mountain pass before returning to Greece, the 10,000 faced yet another opposing force of Taotian and Chilib tribesmen, scattering the enemy in a swift and disciplined night action that allowed the Greeks to seize high ground advantage before returning home with more than 80% of their original numbers. Xenophon's account of their miraculous retreat would prove vital to Alexander the Great's 4th century war against Persia, while Xenophon's detailed accounts of military decision-making and feint tactics are still studied to this day, making the March of the 10,000 one of the most epic tales of survival from ancient Greek history. Alexander the Great. Born into royalty in 356 BCE Macedonia, which was a kingdom in Greek antiquity, by the age of 12, Alexander the Great showed his mettle when he tamed an enormous stallion with a quite furious temper. Once tamed, Bucephalus would become Alexander's battle companion for much of his life. By age 13, Alexander's kingly father hired the great philosopher Aristotle to educate his son, fostering Alexander's passion for literature, science, medicine, and philosophy, adding a Renaissance man quality to what would become one of the greatest military minds of his day. In 338 BCE, 16-year-old Alexander led a cavalry charge during the Battle of Chaeronea against the sacred band of Thebes, who were supposedly an unbeatable select army made up entirely of gay men, which ended in a stunning victory for the young warrior prince. 2 years later, after his kingly father was assassinated by a trusted bodyguard, Alexander claimed the Macedonian throne by age 20, killing his rivals before they could challenge his sovereignty, taking up his father's sword in their shared quest for world domination. Over the next several years, Alexander and his Macedonian army fought their way across the Persian Empire, battling troops put forth by Persian King Darius III, who had amassed a substantial army in defense of Alexander's aggression. After Alexander's victory in the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, Alexander continued his empire building under the motto that there is nothing impossible to him who will try. After storming his way across Egypt, including a full-scale slaughterfest at Tyre, during the October 331 BCE battle at Gaugamela, King Darius was assassinated by his own troops for attempting to flee the battlefield, and while Alexander professed sadness over the death of his rival, Alexander soon proclaimed himself king of the Persians. Over the next 3 years, Alexander would survive many attempts to end his life, forcing him to murder his close friend and general Cletus during a drunken rage, which was a persistent behavioral problem that plagued Alexander throughout much of his life. After falling in love with a Sagian woman named Roxanne, Alexander stormed India, where he suffered the loss of his beloved horse Bucephalus, followed by his own serious injury in a battle with the Mali. By 323 BCE, Alexander was head of one of the largest empires of his age, and after surviving an unrelenting succession of battles, Alexander the Great died of malaria or other natural causes at 32 years of age, sparking a bloody battle of infighting for control of an unraveling empire he fought so boldly to create. And there you have it, ancient Greece, today in the Daily Dose. Today's Daily Dose documentary is brought to you by PlatoSpeech.com, a lesson planning tool leveraging content like this and much more for educators and homeschooling parents. Check out the description for more information so that you too can teach something new every day.